They say the heart chooses who it wants. But my heart wants someone I can never have. My grandfather has another plan. A plan that destroys my world before rebuilding it in the most unexpected way. It all started on the day he gave me that envelope. I always thought my life was mine to decide. Being the grandson of the wealthiest man in the city meant I had choices. I could shape my own future, choose my own friends, and more than anything, choose the woman I loved. But all of that was about to change. That crisp autumn afternoon, I stepped into my grandfather's study. The room smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. Sunlight spilled across the massive oak desk where he sat, his posture straight, his eyes as sharp as the first day I could remember. "Sit down," he said. His voice was calm, but carried a weight that made my chest tighten. I sat. Something told me I wouldn't like what I was about to hear. He leaned forward. "You will find a wife within 3 months, or you will lose every right to my inheritance." I blinked at him. "You can't be serious," but his expression didn't move an inch. From a drawer, he pulled an envelope and slid it toward me. "These are the women I've considered. One of them saved my life. Her name is circled in red." My fingers hovered over the envelope, but I didn't touch it. The silence between us grew heavier, until it was almost hard to breathe. This wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. And deep down, I knew my life was no longer mine to control. Her name was Alina. I'd never met her before, but my grandfather spoke her name with a kind of reverence I'd never heard from him. "She saved my life years ago," he said. "She is kind, loyal, and I trust her." I leaned back in my chair. "That's admirable, but I already have someone. Her name is Clara, and she's the woman I've loved for years." My grandfather's gaze didn't soften. "This is not about love, Adrian. This is about stability, about the future of our family." The words sank like stones in my chest. Beside him, the door opened. A woman stepped in. Alina. She was nothing like I imagined. No extravagant dress, no heavy makeup, just a simple cream blouse. Her dark hair tied back neatly. Her eyes met mine for a brief second, calm, guarded. "I don't want this either," she said quietly, turning to my grandfather. "I don't want to marry a man who doesn't want me." Her voice, it wasn't bitter, it was steady, certain. For a moment, I thought that would be the end of it. We would walk away, each back to our own lives. But I didn't know then that fate had other plans. Plans that neither of us could avoid. A week passed, and I thought I'd never see her again. But fate has a strange sense of humor. It was my cousin's engagement party, one of those extravagant family gatherings where every conversation was laced with business talk and subtle judgment. I was halfway through a polite smile when I saw her, Alina, standing by the balcony, holding a glass of sparkling water. She wasn't dressed to impress. A soft navy dress, minimal jewelry, yet somehow she stood out more than anyone in that room. We exchanged polite greetings. The conversation was stiff, formal. I could tell she didn't want to be there any more than I did. But the night went on, and we ended up sitting at the same table during dinner. My grandfather, of course, was watching us from across the room like a hawk. She spoke only when spoken to, yet every word was thoughtful. She laughed once, just once, at a harmless joke from my uncle. That laugh, it was warm. And then, Clara appeared. She walked up to me, her perfume strong and familiar, and leaned close to whisper something. Over her shoulder, I saw her hand, resting just a little too long on another man's arm. I told myself it meant nothing, but for the first time, I felt an unease I couldn't quite name. The days that followed were nothing I expected. I kept running into Alina, at family lunches, charity events, even at the art gallery where my grandfather had a private collection. It was as if the universe, or maybe my grandfather, was deliberately pushing us together. At first, I kept my distance, but Alina, she was different from anyone I'd met. She didn't ask about my wealth. She didn't try to impress me. She never pretended to be someone she wasn't. One afternoon, we ended up stuck in the same car during a sudden downpour. Traffic was at a standstill, rain hammering against the windows. We started talking about small things at first. Books, music, how she ran a small bookstore she inherited from her parents. She told me about losing them when she was 19, and how the store became her refuge. Her voice softened when she spoke about her mother's favorite book, and I found myself listening more closely than I had in years. That night, we walked back to our cars in the rain. We were both soaked, laughing at how ridiculous we must have looked. And somewhere in that moment, between the raindrops and the sound of her laughter, something in me shifted. I didn't know it yet, but I was starting to care. After that rainy night, things began to shift. We didn't talk about it, but there was something unspoken between us, like a thin thread, quietly pulling us closer. A few days later, I stopped by her bookstore. I told myself it was just to drop off a rare novel I thought she might like. But the truth was, I wanted to see her smile again. The bell above the door chimed as I walked in. She looked up from the counter, her hair loose this time, falling gently over her shoulders. "Adrian?" she asked, clearly surprised. We ended up talking for hours. She showed me the little reading corner she'd set up for neighborhood kids. I watched her kneel beside a child, helping him sound out words, her voice patient and warm. And in that moment, I realized how different she was from Clara. Clara hated children. She once told me they were too much trouble. The contrast was impossible to ignore. That evening, Clara called. She was too busy to meet, but I could hear music and laughter in the background. When I asked where she was, she dodged the question. I hung up, and for the first time, I didn't feel jealous. I felt tired. And somewhere deep inside, I knew my heart was no longer entirely hers. It was late afternoon when my grandfather invited us both for tea in the garden. The air was cool, the scent of jasmine drifting through the breeze. I could tell this wasn't just a casual meeting. His eyes kept studying us like he was reading a book he already knew the ending to. Alina sat beside me, her posture graceful, her gaze lowered politely. I found myself watching her more than listening to my grandfather's small talk. When she smiled at something he said, it was unforced, genuine. Halfway through, my grandfather excused himself to take a call, leaving us alone. Silence stretched between us for a moment. Then Alina spoke. "I know this isn't easy for you, being pushed into something you didn't choose." I met her eyes. "It hasn't been easy for you either," I replied. She hesitated, then said something I didn't expect. "My parents had an arranged marriage. It started cold, but over time, they truly loved each other. I always wondered if that could ever happen to me." Her voice lingered in my head long after we left the garden. That night, Clara called again, this time to cancel our weekend plans. No excuse, just canceled. And as I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the rain against the window, I realized something that scared me. The thought of losing Alina hurt more than the thought of losing Clara. The call came just after midnight. My grandfather had collapsed. I drove to the hospital in a blur, my mind racing through 1,000 worst-case scenarios. When I finally reached his room, he looked smaller somehow, fragile beneath the pale sheets. Machines beeped steadily beside him, each sound a reminder of time slipping away. Alina was already there. She rose from the chair beside his bed, her eyes red but calm. "You should talk to him," she whispered. I sat down, taking his hand in mine. It felt cold, weaker than I'd ever known. He opened his eyes, struggling for breath. "Adrian, I just want to see you happy before I go." My throat tightened. "You will, Grandpa. I promise." He shook his head faintly. "Happiness is not just love. It's finding the one who will stand by you in every storm." His gaze shifted to Alina. In that moment, I understood. It wasn't about the inheritance. It wasn't about family duty. It was about who I wanted beside me when life tested me the hardest. The answer was clear. I reached for Alina's hand. Her eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. "Marry me," I said softly. "Not for him, not for anyone else, for us." The wedding wasn't grand. It wasn't filled with gold chandeliers or long guest lists. It was small, intimate, held in the quiet garden behind my grandfather's house. Only family and a few close friends were there. Alina wore a simple white dress, her hair loose, swaying gently in the breeze. When she walked toward me, every sound seemed to fade, until all I could hear was the beating of my own heart. We exchanged vows beneath the jasmine archway. It wasn't just a promise for love. It was a promise for partnership, for standing side by side through every high and low. My grandfather was there, sitting in his wheelchair, a blanket draped over his legs. When we were pronounced husband and wife, he smiled genuinely, warmly. It was the kind of smile that told me he could finally rest easy. Weeks later, I found myself in Alina's bookstore, helping her stack new arrivals on the shelves. She laughed when I accidentally dropped an entire box of books. That laugh, it still felt like the first rain after a long drought. I never thought I'd thank fate for forcing me into something I didn't want, but it turned out it wasn't fate at all. It was love, finding its way in the most unexpected path. If stories like this warm your heart, share it with someone who still believes in love's quiet miracles.